everyone, we are Geeks Not Nerds. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Eric.
And today, Eric and I are talking about yet another topic that Vince and I did all those years ago, and this time we're going to chat about technology in fiction and how current present-day technology affects storytelling and the kind of, pros and cons to all of the stuff that to tell a believable modern-day story is probably going to wend its way into your stories, and sometimes can help enhance them and sometimes can in a weird way, tie your hands behind your back a little bit. So that's what we're talking about today. Eric, would you like to get us started, sir?
Sure. This is a conversation you and I have had a bit. I've talked to some other people about this.
Almost exclusively related to Batman.
And I've talked with Steve about it related to James Bond.
Yeah.
These are the two big characters that technology has kind of ruined. Batman's not Batman anymore. It's interesting. There was an interview I was listening to with Tom King where he talked about how someone there was like a thought experiment kind of question of like how would Batman deal with this crisis, and all of the other writers, like DC writers, all had like all of these like, well, and then he'll get in his reverse flash mech and he'll do this, and he was like, that doesn't sound like Batman to me. It's one of my biggest problems with Tom King's Batman. Once Batman can holographically photocopy a room and take it back to the Batcave and look over everything in minute detail and blow it up, he's not a detective anymore. He's not a thinking man.
He's certainly not the world's greatest detective, or if he is, we're accidentally sending the wrong signal with that, because it sounds like you need to be the richest person on the planet to also be the world's greatest detective.
Yeah, I think
you almost have to have both. A Batman that is real gadget heavy can also be the world's greatest detective if you make it really clear that there's a separation where Batman is, if you put him on a desert island without that stuff, he still has all these amazing skills and he's not relying too much on that technology.
Yeah, I think we've gotten to a weird place technologically where, the best kind of like techno thrillers or things like that are things that are 5 minutes in the future.
Yes.
5 minutes in the future is far-flung science fiction at this point. Steve and I had a conversation once about James Bond where he was like, yeah, I found out we can put cameras in bees. I was like, yeah, if you put that in a James Bond movie, it would sound dumb and stupid and fantastical. We can do that. We can do that right now. We've gotten to a point with technology where I think for certain characters, we've almost hit a line. I'm like, no, we can't. Batman's kind of not Batman anymore. We've gone too far.
Yeah.
You could introduce Terry McGinnis today, and it would make perfect sense.
Yeah, and we're also in a place where there are all kinds of things that we can do that just, for all kinds of reasons, haven't been allowed to be patented. So, like, we actually live even farther in the future than a lot of people realize, I think, with a lot of things that are possible that just aren't technologies that are readily available. And so the people that might have those technologies would be some of these characters, and as you say, they look kind of futuristic, but if we can do them right now, they're actually not futuristic. If the invention is there.
I mean, I say this all the time, we are living in the future.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And a lot of these characters weren't designed for that. And now we've gotten to a weird place.
And we talk about this all the time. This is a different conversation, but we talk about this all the time with origins and things where, at the very least, you have to start updating certain people because, the big obvious example, the circus isn't a thing anymore. This is kind of problematic with the technology thing, too, where, riddle me this, would Bruce Wayne have to travel around the world anymore?
I don't know.
I'm not sure that he would. I'm not sure that with the resources, especially at his disposal, with the internet. I mean, there are some things that you would need to learn, like face to face with someone. But man, he could be way more easily self-taught than ever before now.
Yeah, I mean, with the way Tom King writes Batman, Scott Snyder writes Batman. I would completely believe that guy just went downstairs and had like a holographic room that just had like a holographic man that he uploaded with all of the like martial arts knowledge and just taught him martial arts. Yeah, that's where we are with Batman. Batman owns a holodeck. And boy, that's not interesting.
And what's rough about it is you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. Because if you take it away, now we're trapping him in the past. Like we're holding him back.
Tom King hasn't done it. And have you noticed?
At some point that will sort of feel like the case. Yeah, but then with and now this has just become a Batman conversation.
Sure.
But the deal.
He's a major character this affects.
The deal with and as some people have pointed out, we like to talk about Batman a lot. I feel like at that point it becomes, and maybe this is your point, with Batman, it becomes a difference in the take on who that character is, because, to be fair, going all the way back, or very far back anyway, it has been often a criticism of Batman that he just solves everything with gadgets. You know, so I mean, like, that's not a modern complaint about Batman. It's just that the technology has gotten so great that we will, at the same time, in the same breath as saying he's the world's greatest detective, we'll give him the ability to, you know, slice dice and make julienne fries, and like, he can do anything.
Well, and it's, to just keep talking about Batman, it's not like Tony Stark, where like the whole idea of that character is that he's always on the bleeding edge of technology.
Well, and you've always had that question with Batman too, of did he invent this stuff or not?
Yeah. Because we've also made Batman a super genius too, and he didn't used to be that either.
But that has been a problem in superheroes, and this is also another conversation, with a lot of characters. I mean, everybody has to become a superhero. Freaking Harley Quinn's a super genius at this point.
Well, and that's a thing with the trading cards in the '90s. Is almost every character's genius level intelligence.
That's right.
I mean, it affects Spider-Man too.
Yeah.
He's another character currently right now that's really
also,
affected.
And that's also become a super genius problem, where like Peter Parker was always really smart, and he was a scientist. But
I never thought of him as Tony Stark or Reed Richards.
Me neither.
And that's where we've taken him.
Yeah. But
and that gives him now super techie suits. I never saw Spider-Man that way. If Spider-Man wanted to be doing that stuff, he would have been doing it in the '60s. Occasionally, he would make like a rubber suit or whatever.
Let's switch gears and go to Bond for a second.
Okay.
What do you at this point do with that character, and make it still feel like sleek and cool, and as you say, like he like on the bleeding edge? I feel like Bond, along with a lot of other characters, like, you know, the Shadow, which is maybe not a great example because that's often period anyway, but like there are a lot of characters like that I kind of just want to keep in a place and time.
Yeah, everyone thought that Bond would end after the Cold War. Like, how do you do James Bond after the Cold War? Cold War didn't stop James Bond. Technology kind of has.
Yeah.
The writers of the new film, which I think are still Purvis and Wade, unfortunately, have talked about like that they're all about tapping into the vein of what's going on right now, which is not a thing Bond was until 2 movies ago, really. But they're like, what's the things that we can talk about now? I'm like, no, you can't do that with James Bond.
Well,
because
part of the reason Skyfall worked was because we commented on it, but we can't make that movie every time.
No. And
that's the problem. You had to have that original tech, but once it's too many generations removed, you can't tell that story anymore, and you don't want to keep telling that same story. The themes of that movie were old and new, and when is it better to go to classic things, and when is it better to go to whatever is current. But again, you don't want to do that every time.
And they tried to do it again with Spectre, kind of.
Yeah, and you can't keep doing that.
You can't just keep having that be the message.
So, like, what do you do moving forward? Like, Skyfall felt like it would have been the perfect last James Bond movie, never make another one.
Well, and
I'm not saying you shouldn't make any more. I am maybe saying that there are certain characters that we need to keep in the past to keep telling fresh stories.
But I don't know where
I mean, that sounds awful, because that might sound like a contradiction to some people, like keeping them in the past to tell fresh stories. Yeah, but if you modernize characters to the point where they're no longer that character anymore, as you say, the characters we've spoken about so far are all 20th century inventions. If you're going to tell new stories about some of these characters anyway, it's going to be difficult to keep them what they are without putting them back in the past. So maybe for some of these people, we should do more of those kinds of stories, and then, dare I say, get some new IPs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The thing, one of the biggest problems I think moving forward with James Bond as a franchise is, how do you have supervillain plots? What could possibly be more crazy than things that are happening right now in the world?
That's right.
Both politically and technologically. What can any villain show up and be like, I have this device that does this thing, and it's like, well, yeah, I have an app for that. What are you talking about?
That's it. And yeah, I love that you said it like that, because what we're about to have the same problem that like retail stores are having, and various kinds of stores are having, just with like help and clerks and things. We're making machines to do everything. And why do you need a superhero if you have a drone?
Yeah. Why?
It's a good question, right?
I mean, and
why do you need a spy if you have a drone?
And Skyfall made a case for why we still need spies.
Sure.
And then Spectre made a really bad case for why we don't. But
yeah.
But Yeah, at least for the rich ones, like Daredevil's always going to make sense. He's just a guy that goes out and punches people.
No, you're
Moon
right.
Knight's always going to make sense.
That M speech is amazing. In
Skyfall.
In Skyfall,
yeah. You know, absolutely. And having just read through all of the...
Yeah, I don't mean to be cynical and say that we don't need those things and that those characters shouldn't be around. It's just getting harder and harder to not say, well, why don't you just use this piece of technology
would
at your disposal?
Would a Bruce Wayne whose parents were shot 10 years ago from today even think to travel the world and train, or would he just make drones?
I don't know.
Especially if it's Scott Snyder's, who just has mechs everywhere. Like, why does Batman even leave the cave?
Yeah, well, and like that could even be like a Scary Elseworlds kind of story, you know?
Well, and they did something like that in Kingdom Come.
Kingdom Come has that, yeah.
Yeah.
Where it becomes almost totalitarian.
Yeah. But I just read through the 3 trades that are currently published by Dynamite for their current James Bond stuff, and they're all set present day, and they're not having the problem the movie's having.
Interesting.
It's today, but...
Is it just because it's more thoughtful about it?
Maybe, or maybe it's because they don't have to worry about, like, we have to be the biggest, most spectacular movie on screen. They can tell smaller stories. So they don't have to go so big.
Is that the key? Is it sophistication?
It might be.
Is that the answer?
It might be.
Is you can keep all this technology around if you make your piece more cerebral and you allow it to be more dialogue driven. I mean, you're seeing things all the time. I go to House of Cards as a big example, but nearly everything I'm watching is starting to do this. Like, it's funny. 5 years ago, I think House of Cards was the first place that I saw somebody type a text message on a phone and then show it to you almost like a text box. Like above it, and we do that all the time now.
Yeah, they do it in Sherlock,
and I kind of like that. Like you can tell stories that way. It's dialogue driven, and it's forcing actors to act with their face.
I've read a comic somewhere where somebody did. There was a whole issue of only text messages. I forget what it is, but something did that.
And I mean, you can do that. And you can also comment on what society is becoming and how we're communicating with that kind of thing. Like I'm not saying you want to avoid modern technology altogether and go to exclusively period pieces, but I do think it can make things much more complicated. And am I wrong in assuming that there are a lot of stories there are a lot more period pieces happening and being greenlit right now?
No, it seems like that.
That's what it feels like.
Especially the 70s. The 70s seem to be very
I just
in
feel like
right
there
now.
are kinds of stories
For
you almost
films.
You either almost can't tell now, or it's difficult to tell if they wouldn't be kind of a different thing.
Well, detective stories are a lot harder now.
Much harder.
Most detective stories could be solved by Googling.
Yeah. Any of us could do it.
Well, and that's the thing that it's interesting because this has affected Batman so much, but other people that aren't rich that kind of still are in that world, it's not affecting them that much. Like, I mean, I guess we're not doing an ongoing The Question story, but like all of these characters, the definition of cyberpunk is high tech, low life, which is the world we live in, and all of these people now have access to technology that makes all of their lives different and easier.
And it's considered a necessity now.
Yeah, everyone has a smartphone.
You're impoverished if you don't have a smartphone.
Everyone has a smartphone. But it's not showing up in everybody's books. You know, I don't think Daredevil's... Daredevil's blind. That's a bad example. Moon Knight's not constantly on his smartphone.
But Jessica Jones is.
Jessica Jones is on her smartphone.
And she's a detective, and it definitely is affecting that. You could say that for some things this is a positive thing, that it makes this kind of storytelling more challenging, and we have to kind of think outside the box. I'm jumping all over the place, but one question, one thing I worry about is that the technology is moving so fast and the culture is changing at such a rapid pace that it becomes harder and harder to tell certain kinds of stories, like detective stories, like anything action-driven with a lot of gadgetry or whatever. It makes it difficult to tell stories that aren't really dated.
Cultural events become really difficult to reference, and I don't mean like tragedies and things like that. I mean, if you were working in comics in July last year and you put in a throwaway line to everyone playing Pokemon Go, if that comic came out in December, it would feel dated.
And most things are written 3 or 4 months out.
Yeah.
Yeah. But not just cultural references. Also, I mean, I guess this is still cultural, but not just like events that are happening. I guess this is the same thing though, because that is a technology. That is a thing that is hip now. we don't know if Reddit will be what Reddit is in 10 years.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing references to Reddit everywhere right now. 10 years ago...
Twitter's the same thing.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Now, these are things that feel like they're going to be more long-lasting and mainstays over...
Same thing with Facebook.
Over something like MySpace, where we hadn't landed on it yet. So, like... I think it's fair to assume that the verb Googling will probably still be around in 10 or 20 years.
Yeah.
But I don't know that for sure.
Yeah.
It's just the technology is changing so fast.
Think of how many companies that 10 years ago we would have assumed would just always be there that folded.
And it's affecting the lingo so hard, you know? I don't like to go to a lot of political references, but and I don't know that this is a great example, but like I don't know for how long you'll be able to make the covfefe reference.
Yeah.
And things like that.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff like that.
Is that just a fly-by-night joke because that happened in a crazy tweet, or is it going to be something that in 2 years people still remember that, you know? How about all the references in comics and other media to the ice bucket challenge?
Yeah. Yeah. I'd completely forgotten about that until you brought it up just now.
Yeah. And so, and I mean, like, every generation, every decade has that stuff. I just feel like, and where you'll go back to things and it feels almost like people are speaking another language.
But it feels like it goes faster now.
I think it does.
Yeah, no,
and so that's a way
that... you said Ice Bucket Challenge, that's like 2 years ago. I feel like that was 10 years ago.
It feels like that, yeah. And so that's, you know, I almost did that. People tried to get me to do that, and I was going to do it with Mountain Dew until I realized just how sticky that would be.
Yeah, that would be really bad.
It would have been really bad, but I was in the middle of making Spawn year when I did that. I was like, oh, what if I went outside and dumped it, and I got halfway through that thought and went, no, we're not doing that. But anyway, I guess we've moved now a little bit from how the technology affects the world in the book, and to a little bit more about how the technology affects the book itself, you know.
There's...
I mean, this is a problem with culture in general. It's difficult to keep up.
Yeah. Well, it's that... you're familiar with the idea of the singularity, yes? I don't know if our viewers are. Singularity is the point that we will reach technologically.
Oh, I see what you're talking about, yeah.
Every day we will have scientific breakthroughs. Like, we will just have so much information. We have computers working on everything. Every single day we will have scientific breakthroughs. That's the singularity.
What happens to your fiction then?
Well, we're closer to that than we want to believe. Or at least it feels like we're closer to that than we want to believe.
It doesn't feel like we're close to a ceiling.
The world is different every year.
Yeah.
Drastically different in some cases. And that makes it...
culturally...
And I do think you're seeing a lot of comics that are... pulling back and being a little bit more any-when.
Yes.
And
it's
the ones that are trying really hard to be modern.
That way.
Yeah. The ones that are trying to be really modern, I think are the ones that are going to date poorly, and those are the ones I'm generally not enjoying reading right now.
I'm with you, and those also tend to become timeless. And I'm sorry. The opposite of that.
Yeah.
Strike that, reverse it.
Yeah.
Those tend to be the stories that are throwaway, and that when someone references it, they're like, "Why are you talking about that? That doesn't matter anymore. It's no longer relevant." I feel like those are the stories that people talk about, or that people bring up when they say, "Oh, that's no longer relevant."
Yeah, in 5 years, no one's going to talk about Champions. 5 years, people might still be talking about Tom King's Batman.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's so, and there's so many things. It's interesting. There are so many things that we are doing in fiction that has changed and doesn't actually reflect the real world, and we just haven't caught up yet. Minnis talked about this with Defenders, where he's like, we're all writing 70s mob bosses.
Yeah.
It's not how crime works right now.
How do you
so
write modern crime? But then the question is it dramatic? Is it interesting?
Yeah.
And then the question is, are we keeping it that way because it's dramatic, or are we keeping it that way because it's familiar?
Mm-hmm. Well, and
because believable always matters more to me than realistic.
Absolutely.
But also, case by case, something can be realistic and believable within the context of the thing that it is. So, like, if what you're trying to write is old school mob bosses, well, there's a realism to that, even if we don't have it now, because in the world you're writing, it's just more like that world than it was, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. One of the things we've talked about is stories are hard to tell now because of technology, because people don't do as much.
Yeah.
People don't go outside and do as much. And
we're not expected to have the skills that we used to.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's almost impressive when people have skills that they would just be expected to have had 30 years ago.
Oh, you can fix a car engine. That's cool. I have no car skills.
Yeah.
15, 20 years ago, I would have had to have car skills. At least changing a tire, changing the oil, things like that. Although I might be able to change oil.
And it's so... Right, because now you have a thing in your pocket where, especially if you have AAA or something, you can just call somebody up and you can get them to come help you.
Yeah, you have to worry about breaking down in the middle of nowhere and you have no phone to anyone.
Yeah, and what is for the majority of stories, except for when the character arc is about a person being lazy or not doing the things they need to do for themselves and they learn to grow out of that, what is generally speaking the most number one important thing to keep a character sympathetic? Being proactive.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's much harder right now.
You almost don't have to be much of the time. I mean, I think you do. This gets into philosophy, I guess, but like my personal philosophy about how people in real life are happiest when they are sympathetic for the same reason a character in fiction would be, where I think. I think being proactive and like not just letting things happen to you is essential for happiness. I kind of think that.
One of the biggest genres I think that's been affected by the technology is horror films. Because the big question is, well, how do you have a horror film if everybody has a phone on them? And the answer was bad reception, or you forget your phone, or it's on vibrate. Those are the three answers. Bad receptions only last so long. We will fix that. We can't be far away from. No matter where you are, you'll have crystal clear.
And as soon as it's in your brain, you're done.
Yeah. Once a phone is in your arm or something, like, or you just have like contacts.
I don't know how far off we are from some of that stuff.
And then how do you keep telling stories in the modern day? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, then everything is really science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we're saying is...
And we've had this conversation, it also gets really hard to extrapolate from now and get creative and imagine an interesting future.
Yeah, I mean, that's a problem with science fiction right now is we don't... All science fiction right now seems to be obvious extrapolation, where it's like, well, we know that this is how this technology works, and in 100 years it'll probably work like this. That's all... It's not interesting or cool anymore. No one has cool ideas about, like, but what if this happened? We don't do that. We can tell great stories in a future. Most futures in science fiction right now, not that different. Do they have fast and light travel? Do they not?
On the other hand, I think sometimes when you science fiction's about the what if question, and when you ask that and you only extrapolate out 50 or 100 years and the world looks a lot like it does now, I think that's kind of just being realistic,
Well, I think
to some degree you have to do that. Like the world of Her isn't suddenly like cars flying around and stuff. It can't be. That's probably not what it's going to look like.
Well, and one of the problems I think we've run into with science fiction is we're now making movies that we made 50 years ago, and they're just actually relevant now.
Yeah.
Like all the artificial intelligence movies, we've been making those since we've been making movies. We've been making artificial intelligence, the dangers of artificial intelligence movies.
Well, I would argue that they were still relevant, but now it feels closer.
Yeah, because we're real close to AI.
And well, we're not as close as some people think we are. I don't think to the kind of artificial intelligence we're talking about, where like robots becoming sincerely, totally self-aware and taking over and trying to murder us. I don't know how close we are to actually.
We have robots that hold conversations.
But we are, but we have really, right, but there is a leap between...
They're not self-aware.
Technology that is able to mimic us, and there's a lot of science fiction that suggests that because a robot can do that, it becomes almost like that science magic question, where it's like, well, at some point it's going to flip over, but like there's probably essential components that to being self-aware that we don't even understand, that a machine's not going to get to just because it's really believable in being able to do those things. But I think it is more relevant in that that the technology is affecting us socially in such a way now where we're like receding into ourselves and we're looking at our phones and at technology and talking to those things, even when we're talking to other people, more than we're talking to actually people face to face, like in almost more of an existential and philosophical way. I feel like that AI question is as much about the ways in which we are already right now relying too much on technology.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's so weird because we're
also talking about that in like every other story, be it science fiction or otherwise, right now.
Yeah. Science fiction ideas are just story ideas at this point.
I feel numbed to it at this point. You know, where that used to be a really interesting thing to think about, and now it's everywhere, and I kind of feel like I'm just having the same thought process every time. Like nothing has made me, and I'm not even saying that we shouldn't be talking about that. I think that tells you something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that there's a fear about that, and that we're afraid. The main thing is we're afraid that relying on all this technology has turned us less human. That's what we're afraid of.
Yeah. But we've been doing that since the 60s at the very least.
Yeah.
We have been, like, there is this kind of sense of, like, so we just didn't listen. We have been telling ourselves for 50 years, hey, don't do this. Hey, don't do this. Hey, don't do this. And we just keep doing it.
It's not a cautionary tale now. It's just, well,
this is the world we live in.
There it is. Yeah. So that's unfortunate.
So,
we got 5 minutes left.
We got
Let's
5
go
minutes
to some
left?
final thoughts, yeah.
Well, I'm going to tell you a real quick story
Go right ahead.
about technological advancements, and I don't know. So I don't really know how to put into words what this is saying, but we've moved so far that we skip certain things that we used to think were going to be steps. So when I worked at a factory, the phones in the factory from like the offices all had like screens on them, like they were like the video phones that were like all over 80s, you know, science fiction movies.
Yeah.
We skipped that process. We never actually had those because we moved away from landlines before we got to cell phones, or before we, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So,
but it felt so weird whenever I had to do it, and I'm like, oh, it's like I'm in the future, but I'm way past that. I go home and I record videos with you through Skype, like, why was that? I don't know. That has nothing to do with this. It's just a technology thing.
Isn't it interesting too? All the while we're there, all the impractical, all the things that we discovered were impractical that we figured we would be doing in the future. But it's like, oh, turns out people don't actually really want to answer a video phone.
Yeah.
Because it's not private enough, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, if you initiate, I think for most people, like, if you, like, I know that our phones can do video as we're talking to people. Have you ever done that? And I don't know a lot of people that have.
Only on accident. Where it's like, somebody tried to Facebook chat me. Oh, they hung up.
Like, I have seen people in TV shows, like, call each other that way. And sometimes it's because they're trying to sell a product. Sometimes it's because there's a phone they're trying to sell. I have never had anyone call me that way. And it seems like if you do, you tend to ask permission first. Mm-hmm. Because that's good. There's an etiquette we figured out. You know, you tend to ask permission first. You get on Skype, people like it when you say, "Are you okay calling me first?" And then, you know.
Well, and it's really hard to be impressed by technology in fiction at this point when what could they possibly do that's not somewhat within our grasp? When Google Glass came out, or was going to come out, or whatever.
Also a thing people decided was impractical.
Yeah.
You know,
but the fact that I could have gotten it means nothing Batman does with his cowl is that cool. Because I could have. $700, I could do what Batman does with his cowl.
That's not true.
No?
Because part of the reason it didn't catch on is there were things that were kind of clunky that it just wasn't as good at as
but
you would
we're
think
still
it would be.
not.
But we'll get there.
We're still real close.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. The reason that Batman is less interesting when he's too gadgety, and especially now when those gadgets actually exist, is because you want to feel like it's his ingenuity that gets him there, right?
You want to feel like he's actually a smart person who's solving mysteries, not a guy with a lot of money who just puts all the pieces out in holograms.
Yeah, and even in the days where we said, well, Batman's just a guy that solves all of his problems with gadgets, a lot of detective stories, he would have the cool gadgets, but it wasn't how he was solving crimes. It was how he was fighting the bad guys. It was how he was getting around and stuff. Now, what you see is stuff that we're either not that far away from or that we have already, and it's just not that impressive because Batman didn't have to invent it, whether or not you think Batman should be an inventor, and he is using that stuff in order to solve crimes. Now, when you look at something, now to be fair, because there's another side to this, I mean, when you look at the Arkham games, I still feel like even though Batman is relying on his like heads-up display and he's got his detective vision, I still feel like he is making observations and jumping to conclusions that I, even if I had the same technology he did, would never come to. And so there are ways to do that and make it feel like, no, Batman is still really good at his job, it's just a 21st century Batman. But it also, for my taste, can get far too complicated. Yeah. You know, like, I almost just want to strip with a lot of characters. And again, there are some characters that are defined by that. But you see, Iron Man's a character that can only exist in the 20th century forward. Batman can exist going all the way back.
Yeah. Yeah. which we've done with Elseworld stuff.
And so I want to strip him away. Well, and I also think that Morrison was making that case when he put him all the way back in the caveman times.
Yeah.
I think there was a less than subtle message there that Batman is universal, and of course, we always talk about how elemental he is. But there's characters like that where I want to strip everything away from them, and
Bond's like that too.
So, see how they handle themselves without all of that.
Yep.
And I feel like because some people are probably gonna comment and say, well, Cap, every generation says that last generation was simpler and easier, and that at least in our lifetimes, that's true. But now I feel like 3 generations have passed within my since I graduated.
Because everything's
15 years ago. It's moving so fast.
And
so it is a really interesting time to tell stories. Is it also interesting that at the same time as we're making this, I don't know if we're making a criticism of the culture, if we're just making an observation. This is how difficult it is, to tell stories with this climate we have and with all this technology. Isn't it interesting that we are still in the television renaissance and that the stories have gotten like more sophisticated?
Is it possible?
I don't mean across the board.
That what we're looking at right now is the death throes of 20th century literature and fiction before we actually get to 21st century fiction.
It's new industrial revolution, right? I mean we're in that's the internet age, and I mean
are we clinging
in internet
to
time? It feels like we've had the internet forever, and of course we've got people watching that can't remember a time when there wasn't the internet, but it's still in its infancy. In the grand scheme, right? I mean,
but are we just clinging to 20th century icons?
Yes.
Dragging them into the 21st century, and maybe maybe we're not that far off from actually letting some of this stuff go and really making 21st century characters and stories.
And then this is another conversation that we don't have time for. And then of course, how much of that is driven by profit?
Yeah. Yeah.
It has to be clear, of course, and I mean, it's and again, that's not entirely a criticism. There's a business that drives this art, where you wouldn't have some of it if you didn't have the business side.
Yeah.
Certainly, but some of that stuff we're keeping around because of brand recognition.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. All right, real quick question before
and because
end.
we also want to still see some stories with those characters. I mean, I don't want Batman to stop.
No.
I don't want Star Trek to stop, even if we have to sort of kind of continue to extrapolate from the 60s, and that's not a world that it's not really the future of our world anymore. I don't care. I love that world, so.
Okay, so here's a quick question right before we end.
Yeah.
Where are we on holograms? Because I feel like Iron Man ruined it. Because Iron Man was intentionally a fantastical.
You are fixated on this hologram thing.
It's not just Batman; it's everything. You look at anything where there is a rich person right now.
Yeah.
They have holographic everything.
It's because one of the main reasons.
And I think that's mainly Iron Man's fault. The movie.
Yeah, but I think there were certainly things that were kind of going to that before that. Not just Star Trek, but like.
I mean, we've always had holograms, but I mean, present day, rich people have holograms. Do rich people have holograms? Is that a thing they have?
No, I don't think so. But the deal is, and holographic technology is in a better place than I think a lot of people realize because a lot of the things that we can do, again, just aren't marketed yet. You know what I mean?
Well, but
I'm not saying we can do what Iron Man's doing.
Look at Amazing Spider-Man. We go to the Oscorp building. There's a big hologram of Norman Osborn like this. Have you ever been to a building with a big hologram? I've been in some expensive, fancy places. They've never had a big hologram.
Well, the difference, I think, I mean, this is a totally different topic, but is this your rant?
No, this is not my rant.
I think,
can we stop doing holograms? Is that okay? That's my rant. No.
And I don't agree with that either.
Yeah.
Either because the deal is, that's one of the last vestiges of in the future, this is what the world will look like, and we haven't quite hit the holodeck level yet. And that's a thing that a lot of people want to see. And there are a lot of like really really great applications for that.
But we're presenting it in modern day pieces.
I know that, but we're presenting it in things that already have super science. And so if you have super science, that is a real clear, obvious place to go. And so if you're like, you have to basically dog on the notion of having any futuristic technology in a present day thing if you're going to complain about that. You see what I'm saying? Like Iron Man can do things that we don't have rocket boots that can do that yet. It's like that sophisticated yet. So like, if he has that, it makes a lot of sense that.
Well, I don't have a problem with Iron Man doing it because Iron Man's a super genius. I kind of have an issue with an Amazing Spider-Man.
Why?
Because it looks like our world.
Okay, but Marvel sort of looks like our world. It is exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Oscorp makes super science.
Yeah.
And every Spider-Man thing going all the way back has technology that we don't have yet. It's exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I know. It just
now,
seems like it's
to
in
be
everything.
fair, in Marvel,
everything
that's
didn't all of a
exactly
sudden
the
have
same
gliders,
thing,
but like it just feels like everything I watch now has holograms.
But I think that tells
feels-
you something.
Okay.
I think it tells you that we're getting closer to the cusp of that, or at the very least that and I mean the fact that people are imagining that and want to see it doesn't mean that we're on the cusp of it. But we're looking at at technologies
really
we're at,
close.
and people feel like we're really close to it, and it also tells you that it might be a thing that people want. I mean, I think it's important to sometimes look at patterns like that and try to figure out what it tells us about the culture. Like, there's a reason that it's in everything. That's a complaint I like to make about a lot of things. Oh no, why is it in everything? But sometimes it tells you something.
Well, and we do have holograms.
Right.
There's those concerts in Japan you can go see with the holographic girls
Sure.
and stuff.
Well, and I've been to haunted houses that have them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
That like make ghosts and things.
That's
You
cool.
know, it's kind of cool.
But yeah, I don't know if we got to any point on this whole topic. If we really got to the bottom of anything.
It was interesting to explore again. I mean, ultimately, and I don't know where we landed on it last time, but ultimately, I guess my final thoughts on the actual topic are, like with so many things, it's just very complicated, and so
I think potentially
all the
right now we're seeing growing pains.
Yeah, we did. I think there was one big thing that we maybe landed on, which was your observation of maybe this is the death throes of some characters that are going to have to be either massively reinvented or not make it into the 21st
Well, and not
century.
just characters, but like concepts and ideas.
Yeah, because I mean, like we are, when you go back and you look at the early 20th century, there were things we clinged to from the 19th, certainly.
Sure. But by the time we were in the 50s, we weren't writing crime like it was in 1882.
Right, and when you look at, but I mean, we're only in 2017. I mean, it makes a lot. The aughts and the teens. And even to some degree, the 20s. Not that I was there, but just from what you can
20s war so much harder.
Just from what you can go back and glean from those decades, they don't feel the 20s more so, but they don't feel like they have. What am I trying to say? Like exactly as much presence as the rest of the decades. What I mean is like they haven't found an identity like the rest of the decades did, and that's because they're trying to pull away from that prior decade. So of course we're seeing that happen now, and maybe that's also part of why it feels like things are moving so quickly, where we're kind of trapped in a headspace of the prior century, and we're seeing where things should go, but we're kind of like holding on to the past. But I think things are moving that fast.
Yeah, I agree.
So I don't know. There are some kinds of stories that it would be difficult for me to not just want to go back to the past.
Yeah,
in order to tell.
A lot of spy stuff, a lot of crime stuff,
and we didn't talk about the nostalgia factor, which is massive.
Yeah.
But again, that's part of that whole we're clinging to the 20th century.
Yep.
Like, isn't that really interesting? I mean, we're almost into the 20s, and we are so obsessed with the prior century.
Yep.
But right now we're still married to it.
Yeah, we'll see what happens in 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, I can't begin to tell you what the world looks like in the 2040s.
Boy, do I hope in 10, 20 years we're done with the 80s. I love the 80s like everybody else, but man, I'm done with the 80s right now.
Yeah. But fusion can be interesting.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's go ahead and go to rants now. And Eric, what is your rant for today, sir?
I'm going to rant about The Dark Tower. So Sony pushed back the release of the Dark Tower film because they felt like they hadn't properly...
You mean the first one? Like, it's still coming out the date that they've said it's coming out, right?
Yeah,
They push it back again.
No.
Okay.
No, so they pushed The Dark Tower back, which is a film that's been in development hell for a decade now, and is finally coming out. And they pushed it back because they felt like they hadn't advertised it enough. They weren't pushing it hard enough.
That's fair. They hadn't.
Have they now? We're like maybe a month and a half out from when that movie
Yes, they have, because I've seen things about it. I mean, more so than they did. You had to tell me it was coming. I didn't even know it was happening. I mean,
I keep forgetting.
I at least would have known it, apart from you, If they put it, but I'm with you. Maybe they haven't done enough with it.
They're not advertising it like
Doesn't
they
it
advertise.
feel like it's only for? We've talked about this, but doesn't it feel like it's only for fans of that property already? And
but it looks like it was specifically made not for them. It was trying to get a mainstream audience.
It's gonna bomb.
It's gonna bomb.
I'm sorry. There's no way that movie makes money.
Those trailers
and what's
don't
it
look
opening up
particularly great.
against? We'll have to look at the dates, but
I think it's opening around Kingsman.
It's right, but it is July, right? Or is it in August?
I think it's in August.
Okay.
I'm not sure, but
it's just we're about to come up into the biggest weeks.
It's like they made that movie thinking that they were going to make a summer blockbuster, and now that's time to release it. They're like, I don't know if this is a summer blockbuster, which is the mindset they should have had in the first place, because Dark Tower is not a summer blockbuster. But
it strikes me as a movie you release in the winter.
It seems like they're getting really cold feet on this, and they're not actually gung ho about advertising it and wanting to. I can tell you, I'm not
sure of it.
I'm gonna say 75% sure there will be no sequel. We will not get more of this. This movie's not going to do well, and I think a lot of that could be advertising. They're not advertising enough, and it doesn't seem like they're advertising it well. I don't know one person, and I work in a retail job where we sell movies and things like that.
No one's coming and talking about it.
No one's coming like, oh man, I saw this trailer for this thing called Dark Tower. Have you heard about Dark Tower? No one. We made an end cap for Stephen King movies because Dark Tower and It are coming out. No one bought them except for It.
And It you're hearing about.
Yeah.
People are talking about that
some
movie.
reason. Looks so generic.
All I hear people talk about is how great that trailer looks.
I don't understand that. I think it looks really generic, but whatever. But why just if you weren't going to put any more marketing push behind it, why didn't you just keep the release date?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like they're trying any harder. I'm not going to rant about that the movie doesn't look right. I'll take it on its own terms, and maybe it's not being advertised well, or it's just a different thing, and I have to accept it on those terms. But they pushed it back to advertise it, and they're not doing that.
They're advertising it very generically, which makes me wonder if...
It looks like just a generic superhero knockoff.
It makes me wonder if they're confused because it's such a strange experiment. Isn't that movie supposed to be in the same continuity as the books, even though it's an adaptation of some of them?
Yes, it is supposed to be.
That's a really strange thing to try to market.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially if they get into some later book stuff.
But they're also not telling you any of that.
Yeah. Well, especially if they get into some later book stuff where the Dark Tower's in continuity with everything. Literally, The Wizard of Oz, everything. Everything is in continuity with the Dark Tower.
I mean, if I was going to do that, I would have marketed it like a really weird thing, and I would have come up with... honestly, now that you say that, because you had told me that before, that I had forgotten that... I knew it was a meta thing, and I knew that Stephen King was a character in it, but I had forgotten that it was supposed to be continuous with everything that's ever existed. Okay, so... how does this not have the most massive viral marketing campaign you've ever seen?
Yeah.
It should.
Yeah.
That's how you market this. Forget the trailers. You should see random crazy crap popping up everywhere, and it should be telling you that you are a part in it. It should really.
Yeah.
If it is what you're saying.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. I mean, it should feel like it should be like if they hired Morrison to advertise it.
Yeah.
That's what it should feel like.
Yeah. I mean, when
it should be like Multiversity. That's what it should be.
When Stephen King shows up, we are told that he has to write the Dark Tower, otherwise very Morrison-y. He has to write the Dark Tower, otherwise it doesn't happen. And if it doesn't happen, the entire universe will die.
And does you reading it have any impact on the story?
Not like Morrison, but in the sense that...
Because in Morrison, it's don't put this book down.
In the sense that the story you're reading had to be written, because if it wasn't written, the entire universe would no longer exist and you wouldn't be here anymore.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. Yeah, sell it on that. I mean, maybe they pulled all the metafiction stuff out, which would be a shame.
Yeah. But I don't understand that if it's supposed to be a sequel.
Yeah.
To things that are in other media.
And they're still saying that they're going to do those HBO TV shows,
which was supposed to be in continuity.
Yeah, with these. The first one, there's two of them. I don't know what the second one is, but the first one's supposed to be kind of the Roland origin story. It's going back and doing the Wizard and Glass stories and what was the first comic book. I don't get it.
It seems like that should be the most fun thing to try to market next to Deadpool, and it's a shame that they didn't go that way.
Now we haven't seen it like a regular action
We haven't
movie.
seen the movie, but it also sounds like if it's just a regular action movie, that that's kind of, that, as you say, that's a shame. It's a missed opportunity. And B, it's not what it's not what you said it was in the first place. I don't understand that.
You've got like what, a month and a half to read all 7 of those books?
Yeah, that's not gonna happen. Sounds like I may not need to. It sounds like it might not even be worth seeing. But who knows? I mean, like I said, we haven't looked at it yet. But
yep. But yeah, no, that
it would almost be more of a shame if it's great.
Oh, it would be if I'm right, if I'm 75% right, and we don't get a sequel, and if it's actually really good, oh, I'll be so angry.
Yeah,
I'll be so angry. It doesn't even have to be like accurate to the book. Like if it's just amazing and good, but they're selling a really generic. Like there's a big blue beam in the sky, like, I mean, there's kind of a big beam in I mean, there are beams in the books. And that's a thing, but not the way they're showing it here, where it's shooting up into the sky. Like
it just looks like Suicide Squad again.
Yeah, or Avengers, or the ending of superhero movie you've
ever seen. Right,
it looks so generic.
Superhero films, yeah.
But yeah, they're not advertising it well, and they're not advertising enough, and they push you back to advertise it. That's my rant.
All right. Well, my rant today is about Hulu. And this is not the first time that I've ranted about this. Yeah, Hikaru Hulu. Did you know that Hulu, that Lieutenant Commander Hikaru Hulu will fire phasers for you if you give him $15 a month? That's what he does. No, and if you give him an extra $4 a month, he'll do it without commercials. Anyway, so Hulu is obviously. They have content that expires. A lot of they have original content that stays there, and they have other content that just stays there, and it's like it's like Netflix. And they keep things longer than Netflix does. They tend to. But there are a lot of things, of course, that are just whatever is on television right now, and that's a way to cord cut and watch those things. But they take things down 5 episodes back.
Yeah.
Now sometimes, so you can kind of set your watch by that. You don't really need to know exactly when those are going to expire if you're watching a regular television show, because if you know the next episode is about to come out, as long as you know the air date, you can guess approximately when the 5th episode back is going to drop, because that would be 6, and that's how math works. So
yes.
that episode's going to drop, right?
Except for us with Gotham, where we couldn't keep track.
Right. However, well, we couldn't keep track of the weeks. It wasn't because we weren't good at math. It was because we
have no sense of time.
We had no sense of time, but that's not important right now. What is important is that they don't tell you when other things are expiring that are not just 5 episodes back. So if they do decide to drop an entire show, or they have like they're set up with networks differently where they're allowed to keep things longer, like for instance Legion, those things will stay there, and then they'll say,
because they had all 8 episodes,
and it's still there right now as I'm recording this. Now it is very likely that it's gone by the time I post this. That's the point. I can't tell you because they won't give you the date. But they used to, and that's what's irritating. They used to have queues, like Netflix did.
Yeah.
And when they had a queue, they would tell you precisely what date those things were going to drop, so you can make sure and watch it until it dropped. They don't do that now. Now it just says expiring soon. And I went in and researched it and checked to see if maybe it was somewhere that I wasn't aware of, and it's not. So it used to be that, I don't know if I'm right about this. I can't remember if it would say it was expiring soon, and then you could click on it and it would remind you again while you're watching it that it was expiring. I forget. I think it did that. But I thought maybe it was within the player itself. That when you start watching it, it'll say make sure and get it watched.
On the video.
Yeah.
Before you click them, it was right there.
I thought it did. Yeah.
Expiring this date.
So that's not there anymore. And this is somewhat hearsay. This next thing I'm going to mention, I cannot be absolutely positive that somebody isn't just making this up, but it sounds plausible to me, so I'll mention it. I then looked at a message board where people were talking about this, because I wanted to know if maybe that expiration date was someplace obscure, and I hadn't found it. Mm-hmm. So I found a forum in which people were talking about this, and somebody claims that they did a direct text chat with some tech at Hulu, and they asked if there was any way to tell when those things were expiring, and the tech said, "No, I'm sorry, we don't give you that information." And that person swore up and down that has never been a feature, which is just a lie.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that is just a lie.
So this person is right, and I only have this from one random forum I read, one person. So I mean, that's not any kind of a sample set. But if that person is to be believed, then I suspect that probably happened. Just in reading it, it sounded real plausible and real sincere. And there were other people complaining about their customer service. So that at least I have multiple corroborations. People were complaining about their customer service. Somebody claims that they were directly lied to. Oh no, we've never done that.
Well, I mean, with a thing like that, it's also possible they don't know. Those are people there for a paycheck. They're not actually part of.
And there would be a whole lot of turnover. But I don't want to be cynical about this, but I have known places that tell people to lie about certain things on purpose, and they're rewriting their own history. They want to rewrite history.
So for some reason they don't want that feature there, and they want you to think that you just imagined that feature.
Or as you say, that guy just didn't know.
Yeah.
I mean, you're absolutely right. That is possible. So the real rant is, how come I can't know when those things are going to drop? Because the thing is, that is 8 episodes of television, and I'm in the middle of rewatching, or I'm in the middle of watching all of season 2 Supergirl, so that I can do a video on that. And
you don't want to start 3 episodes into
Legion and then lose it, and just have to wait until it goes to Netflix or wherever it's going to go.
Yeah.
So that's, I don't know, that's just really upsetting. I mean, it's really cool that they got to keep those 8 episodes. I guess the moral of the story is I should watch everything when it's on, but I, it's hard to keep all that stuff in your head.
Got lives,
so
man.
I'm watching things all at once.
That's
together,
why. No, that's the whole point of Hulu and Netflix is you don't have to watch it while it's on.
That's the point. Yep. So anyway, but I don't know. I find that frustrating. And the larger issue is all the features you used to have that seem to get gutted on a lot of these websites for seemingly no good reason.
Can I tag on a mini rant that jumps off of your rant?
Sure.
Why is it so hard to find out what's leaving Netflix?
Yeah.
There should be a just standard website I can go to that just says...
There actually is.
I've never been able to find a standard website. I found different websites post things that are like, these are the things leaving Netflix, and they're always those stupid lists where it's like, here's the 20 things leaving Netflix, and click page item by item.
No, I have found one that will give you a straight up list.
Then I retract my complaint! I've never found it.
I think it's even news articles at certain like entertainment websites.
No, it is, but it's every time I've ever looked at one.
No, I know what you're saying, but I have recently read them where it doesn't do that, and it gives you an actual list you can look at. Yeah.
Oh, I'd never found that.
Yeah, no, I see what you're talking about. But recently I have looked at them where I don't know if it's Hollywood Reporter or what it is.
Okay.
But where it's a newspaper website that gives you like a newspaper article or like a magazine article. Yeah.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, where it doesn't make you click page after page after page.
I hate that so much.
No, and I just won't even do it. You know what? This is a totally other thing, but I'll say this real quick before we finish. Something I ran into today that I've never seen before that I really didn't like. Mm-hmm. I could save this, but it's not much of a rant. And it's hard to describe without showing it to you. But have you ever seen this? Today, first time ever. I've ever seen this. I was reading an article. And it's bullet pointed, like you're talking about, but instead of having to go page after page, the pages like overlap. So you read a page, and then you start to scroll down, and what you're really doing is scrolling up a page that overlaps over the page you just read.
That on top?
And no, nothing.
Okay.
It's just an aesthetic they think looks cool. And it's not like a problem or anything, it's just really strange, and I didn't know why you would have that, and it seemed like a really unnecessary, like, bells and whistles thing.
Yeah, especially, I mean, my phone's not the best, especially now.
I don't know if I still have that article up. I think it was the last article I was reading.
My phone's not the best, but one of the things I hate about stuff like that is it makes my phone run so much slower, and it has to like keep reloading the page and stuff. I hate that stuff.
Yeah, I don't think I can show it to you right off. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. That was weird. Well, anyway, folks, thanks as always for watching. We sure appreciate it. And we will see you again shortly with another one. And we will continue doing Geeks Not Nerds Revisited for the foreseeable future and go back to some old ideas and questions that we haven't tackled in a long time in this not too distant future we're currently living in.
Yeah.
I am Captain Logan.
I'm Eric.
Thanks for watching, folks.